Hello, my name is Rinon and Endwalker is fast approaching. We're only a few weeks out from experiencing the new jobs, story and raids, and I can imagine a lot of healer mains have one question on their mind right now. What's going to be good and what should I be playing? The introduction of Sage and the removal of Nocturnal Sect from Astrologian has thrown a spanner in the works for the relatively predictable healing meta of the last 6 years, and for the first time in a while there are significant choices to be made in what you want to play and why. Today, we're going to be discussing the relative pros and cons of Scholar in Endwalker, discuss how it will change in terms of playstyle, and I'm going to give some opinions and predictions on where it's going to lie performance-wise based on the Media Tour build. Please note, absolutely all of this can and will change when the final tooltips and potencies are released alongside Endwalker. We'll talk more about that then when the game is actually out. But first off, let's break down the changes to Scholar and how it's going to affect the job. A single target healing ability called Protraction has been added. This ability increases the maximum HP of a target party member or yourself by 10%, and it also restores the amount of HP increased. On top of that, it increases HP recovery by healing actions by 10%. All of this lasts for 10 seconds and it has a 60-second cooldown. Every healer has gotten a single target healing or mitigation skill in Endwalker like this, and Scholars may seem like one of the weaker ones, but this is actually better than it appears because it synergizes really well with Scholar's kit. When you're spreading an Adlo, using this on your target beforehand is going to strengthen the shield and increase your mitigation, and it's also able to buff the strength of mitigation like Paladin's Divine Veil as well. Expedient is the big meme ability that allows you to run away from your problems. It increases movement speed for all party members and reduces damage taken by 10%. It lasts 20 seconds and is on a 2-minute cooldown. There are some fringe uses where this could be stronger than an ability like Temperance on White Mage, but on the whole this doesn't really wow me in comparison to the kit changes that some of the other healers are receiving. In terms of changes to currently existing abilities, Fey Blessing is now completely unlinked from the Fairy Gauge and is just a plain 60-second free cooldown. Possibly the biggest change to Scholar is actually Embroil. It's been made a half-cast like Astro's Malefic, and this is the single greatest change to Scholar's playability next expansion, giving it tons of breathing room in terms of off-global GCD weaving to ensure that you can combo your abilities effectively. It's also the only healer with a large number of on-demand DPS positive movement skills with the Ruin 2 into Energy Drain combo. No other healer has anything that quite matches that. Energy Drain is no longer linked to Scholar's mana economy. Instead of it restoring MP, now, using Aetherflow will replenish 20% of your MP. Using Aetherflow and Lucid on cooldown is going to be the best way to keep your mana afloat on Scholar. This generally means that you're going to have a more consistent mana economy than you did in progging Shadowbringers, but those Scholars that are super optimized to the point of being able to use 3 energy drains a minute are going to find themselves lacking a little in the mana department compared to before. Fey Blessing's change also increases the usability of Fey Union. In Shadowbringers, both Blessing and Union used Fairy Gauge, meaning that you'd have access to less Union uptime than you will have in Endwalker, which combined with all of those extra off-global GCD spaces means you can keep the tank tethered more than ever before. Deployment tactics is changing from a 120-second recast to 90 seconds, and Art of War will upgrade to Art of War 2, which does 180 AoE potency. Scholar still has the highest AoE filler potency of all of the healers thanks to this. Fairy scaling has also changed and relatively speaking has increased in capability, stealth buffing all abilities that originate from Eos, Selene and Seraph. Additionally, your GCD shields will feel stronger relatively than they were in Shadowbringers thanks in no small part to the stat squish that's going on next expansion. So what does this mean on the whole for Scholar? What's the bigger picture? Well, it means that the optimal playstyle that you're aiming for is going to be seeing some small changes in Endwalker. While you have most of the same priorities, you're going to be punished for not efficiently making use of your fairy skills more than you ever have been in the past, and Scholar is likely to become slightly more complex than it has been previously as a result of that. An Endwalker Scholar looks a lot like this. You're going to refresh your dot every 30 seconds and you're going to spam broil much like before, but within all of these off-global slots you have a lot of freedom to fit in your 3 heals and hopefully 3 energy drains every minute. Your goal is to reduce as much GCD healing and also as much Aether Flow healing as possible. Energy Drain is more of a DPS gain than it was in Shadowbringers, so each Aether Flow skill used is more damage lost than it was in the past. Instead, you want to find these newfound weave windows to play incredibly efficiently with your free actions. Timing is going to be more important than it ever has been before. By free actions, I'm talking about those abilities that cost Scholar absolutely nothing in DPS to use. These include Whispering Dawn, Fey Illumination, Fey Blessing, Fey Union, the Constellations from Seraph, the Aether Flow heals that you gain from using Recitation, Dissipation's heal buff, and the new abilities Expedient and Protraction. These are going to be your first port of call in Endwalker, and in an ideal scenario, these are the only healing abilities you'll use during encounter uptime at all. Everything else is going to be reserved for fight downtime, or in the case of Aether Flow heals, never used at all if you plan on being DPS optimal, while in reality, using only these skills isn't usually going to be possible. It's a goal to aim for. But what about healing on the whole? Well, if we aren't talking about a hyper-optimized setting and are instead discussing how most of us are going to play the game, in Prog, Party Finder or Duty Finder, Scholar is looking pretty decent. They have access to this massive arsenal of free healing abilities and can combine them together to deal with many high stress scenarios, and when that doesn't work, you still have access to the old reliables. Indom and Excog are still excellent, Sacred Soil is still busted, and Scholar's spread low is better than it has been in years. Deployment Tactics cooldown reduction to 90 seconds makes it line up naturally with Recitation, and now you've added Protraction to Fey Illumination and Dissipation as abilities that will buff the strength of the shield, meaning that when you need to mitigate a massive single hit, you are uniquely positioned to deal with it well. This is really big in prog settings especially. But we can't just talk about this job in a bubble to discuss how good it's going to be. How does it line up against its greatest direct competitor, the new hotness barrier healer Sage? I'm going to discuss Sage in greater detail in one of my next videos, so please look forward to that if you're interested on how it's going to play and a deep dive on its abilities, but for now, we're just going to put them directly alongside one another. In terms of DPS, Sage is currently the strongest healer even when including White Mage and Ast in terms of personal DPS, but it offers no raid buffs at all. Scholar still has access to change stratagem, so whether it's going to pull ahead on the raid DPS or not is going to be subject purely on the strength of the other jobs and your party. One thing to note is that thanks to stat scaling, Chain is going to gain value as the expansion goes on. Right now, I'm guessing Sage is ahead. In terms of healing, we need to break things down a little bit more. A simple way to deal with this is to break things down in terms of AoE healing and then afterwards in single target healing. In terms of raw AoE healing, Sage has a clear advantage. They match each other mostly heal for heal, but Sage has access to both Physis 2 and Pneuma, and Scholar has nothing to directly match them. Physis 2 is a 3-minute cooldown AoE heal that also increases the healing received by the targets to 15 seconds, and Pneuma is a DPS neutral AoE and DPS combo on a 2-minute cooldown, which also provides the same mitigation offered by Expedient. It's pretty strong. Sage also has the 2-minute cooldown Pain Hammer. I may have mispronounced that, by the way. I wanted to talk about this one for a moment because it's important in terms of understanding some of the strength differentials between these two healers. Pain Hammer essentially grants the group a small shield and 5 stacks. As soon as the shield breaks, you lose a stack and you get a new shield. If you still have stacks at the end of its 30-second duration, they're going to be eaten and converted directly into heals. Broken, right? Well, let's compare. This ability is so strong for instances of repeated raid damage like Neo X-Death's Soft Enrage. But, as I've mentioned before, Scholar has the ability to create a huge spread adlo that is more useful for single hit mega busters like a Mornifar and Ukop. Scholar also has access to Consolation to further buff for that initial massive hit, and you can find ample uses for Consolation where it's going to eke out Sage in terms of usefulness. So each healer is especially strong at mitigating a certain type of damage, and you're going to find uses where each shines in raid encounters. On the whole though, Sage and Scholar have pretty comparable healing kits. Sage even has an answer to Scholar's Sacred Soil with Keracol. The key difference between these two is that soil is placed, whereas Keracol comes from the Sage, and one costs an Aether Flow, whereas the other costs an Adder's Gall, which is free by the way, you get it every 20 seconds. When it comes to single target healing, namely, how good is this job at keeping the tank alive? Actually, I think they're pretty comparable in terms of being able to heal a tank when necessary, but where the two differ from one another is in how many of those heals are free in terms of damage cost. Scholar has Excog, Lustrate, Fey Union, Protraction and their GCD heals, but only Fey Union and one Excog every 90 seconds is truly free. Bear in mind that Scholar also has constant passive healing from Eos, Selene or Seraph autos. Sage has Krasis to buff healing received, Drukhul, of which you can have up to 3 uses back to back, Toracol to offer both healing and mitigation, Zoe to double the strength of the next heal, which you can then pair with Pneuma for either single target or AoE healing, and a single target variant of Painhammer called Hamer. On top of all of this, you also put your Guardian on the tank taking damage to passively heal them for every DPS skill that you use. On the whole, Scholar is able to output more healing on a tank in a short space of time than Sage can, but it comes at the cost of Aether Flow stacks, aka directly losing damage. Sage, however, is excellent at sustaining a tank from boss auto attacks without losing any DPS in the process, and it can do so over an extended period of time with ease. One additional thing to bear in mind, by the way, is that on the whole, I think Scholar has better movement than Sage. Sage has its Gap Closer, whereas Scholar has the Rune 2 Energy Drain combo that it can use 3 times a minute if it wants to, and I think that that is more freedom and usability, but you can pick your poison there basically. So where does that leave us? In terms of shield healers, I believe that Scholar has the highest burst healing, as well as the highest upfront mitigation capability, but it falls behind in terms of sustained healing across multiple hits, and in fights that don't hit incredibly hard it's going to struggle to maintain zero cost healing as easily as Sage can. However, it has excellent movement and a robust healing portfolio that rewards good planning and can be catered to almost every situation, even though you may have to think a little bit more than you did in the past to fit everything in efficiently. The fairy buffs were also really nice for Scholar's passive and free healing capabilities. In terms of damage, the impact of Chain is what's going to decide its place in the leaderboards, honestly, but also your ability to aim for as many energy drains as possible under raid buffs. For those of you that enjoy Scholar, it's looking better than ever at what it does. The half casts improve its playability massively, and everything about the job that you loved is still there. For those of you that were hoping for more sweeping reworks of the functionality of the job, well, there's always next expansion. Thank you very much for watching everyone, and I hope you have an absolutely fantastic day. I stream on Twitch 5 days a week, so if you want to hang out with me, you're more than welcome to. You're very welcome. The link is in the description. Have a good one, everyone.